Hello, how are we doing? Well, welcome back to the League of Legends episode. This, of course, being the LCS breakdown, week number 4. I bought a shirt this past week. If you guys were curious, just for this episode as well. Hope you guys all enjoy some crazy things happening in North America. If you are new to the series, welcome. And we actually break down 5 awards and, of course, our brand new standings. MVPs of the week, Team of the week, Play of the week, Underwhelming Team, and Underwhelming Player of the week are our 5 awards. And the best job that you guys can do possibly is leave a comment down below who you think deserves these awards. So, of course, this past weekend, Team Liquid, they saw their fall. We'll break down awards here shortly, but definitely needs to be talked about a bit later in the episode. It was actually just shortly afterwards as well. Doublelift had this thing to say during LCS Live. They released this kind of short interview right before the matchup against TSM. He said this, kind of talking about his actual mental advantage over Sven and how much they actually missed him ever since Doublelift, of course, left that TSM roster.
I feel bad for Sven especially because all the fans just say, man, the team was so much better when Doublelift was here, and it must make him feel like shit all the time, which is actually really good for me because I have like this mental advantage over him 24/7. Because, you know, it's like you're just trying to play your best for TSM, and then all the fans are like, man, it was so much better when he wasn't on the team. And it just, if the players were able to play without like any pressure or something, I think they could be really, really good. But because of all the expectations, because it's TSM and the fan base is so rabid, like, I think they just lose the mental game every day.
And yes, it was just, 30-40 minutes later that it was TSM giving Team Liquid their first loss of the entire split. Of course, we'll talk about that a bit later on. Alongside that, Cloud9, 2 wins against some lower rated teams out there. FlyQuest as well, 2 very important wins to maintain our top 3 right now. Liquid, Cloud9, FlyQuest, everyone else, in my own opinion, you guys can of course defer from that, are pretty far below. Although just a couple games separate the remaining teams in the league so far, well, it is not very hopeful for the future of North America. I think we all can agree we'd like to see, 3, maybe 4 really dominant teams in a big separation. Right now, teams still clumped together. Yes, we're still 4 weeks in though, so let's break down, of course, our first award of the week, that being Teams of the Week, the first of which has to go to Cloud9. Now, I will say, I'll preface, yes, they played 2 of the weaker teams right now. I think 2 teams we can pretty much guarantee for bottom 6, not necessarily Echo Fox because Rush never goes 0-2. That continues for the 4th weekend straight and throughout his career as well. They do split their series, but still, Cloud9 actually beating both these teams, that being Echo Fox and Optic, 2 teams who I think are definitely lower rated teams out there, even though everyone is still bunched up. Although they do so against Echo Fox very impressively. That lack of synergy, lack of communication, Cloud9 takes full advantage. That game was a complete sweep in my opinion. Not so much against Optic. Optic had a great early game, I think, against Cloud9, but Cloud9 waiting it out, more methodical approach this time, waiting for that seemingly now classic Optic mistakes post 20 minutes, which they almost crumple. Now, I will say that I'll give compliments to Optic Gaming though. Huge improvements ever since their first game. They've had 4 with this official starting roster. Their first game, terrible. Their next 3 though, communication definitely up. Improvement for the first 20 minutes. The latter half, the late mid to late game itself has really been a struggle for Optic. Still a team with high potential and a great early game so far, but besides that, not too much for them. So Cloud9 looking pretty dominant. My other team though, arguably most impressive, has to be Golden Guardians, and their early game against Liquid looking very clean. I think it was pretty relentless. We've seen many teams kind of crumple to that constant counter pick, constant counter gank by Liquid mentality, and it kind of led to a lot of missteps around the Baron. If a team like Golden Guardians during that game does not let Liquid get that team fight win plus the Baron, which Liquid does so well with, I think this game goes either way. And yes, you could say that with a lot of matchups, right? If this team gets Baron, they likely will win. It's definitely a favor in their percentage in their favor, but still, Golden Guardians look very solid early on. Just a few missteps that led to Liquid capitalizing, and either way, Golden Guardians though against CLG, their early game was so dominant. Props to Hanser, guys. He pushes his lane so hard, and his win against them in the top lane, I still think won them that game, and they push it late as well. This team looks very stellar early. They look pretty good late. If they can kind of solidify that mid to late game against teams like Liquid, Golden Guardians certainly impressed me this week. Now, speaking of MVPs out there, some good teams have some good players, and well, I think Cloud9 have a lot of those good players. players. I think Zeyzal and Alistar, their first game against Echo Fox, I still think a clean victory no matter what. He was definitely an impact player in that game. Some great engagements there and some great knockups. Just stellar to watch, I think. If he had a cleaner second game, I'm not really sure Rakan is his favorable choice of champion, especially damage-wise, but still a pretty solid figure overall. Then, of course, we have Sneaky on his Sivir Xayah picks. He had a super clean weekend, but I think Licorice as well against Optic on his Urgot was a carry for this roster. So kind of 3 individual MVPs. I haven't talked about Cloud9 much for the MVP candidate for these series so far, so that was what I thought about them. My other MVPs, though, have to be Hanzer on Golden Guardians. Just a clean weekend out of this guy, and especially when you look at that first matchup, the way he got ahead, just Hanzer pushing his lane constantly won these guys their games, and I really have to give it to the guy. I think overall a stellar weekend and one of the best, if not the best weekends I've seen out of Hanzer so far. He pushes lanes, he wins lane, not getting caught out, I think, at all this weekend. Correct me if I'm wrong. And very lastly, guys, PoE. This man's Kassadin won them their first game and their only game this weekend, but alongside that, still had a pretty clean game. Other than that, for CLG, just not enough so far against Golden Guardians. He still got first blood. He didn't get cut out whatsoever. It's just his team around him kind of slowly fell apart as they have in the past. Darshan getting cut out countless times, time and time again. I believe it was actually him who got cut out for Hanzer's first blood, which he kind of snowballed in that game. Hanzer, our MVP, I think PoE a secondary candidate because he carried CLG to their only win, and he had a pretty clean weekend besides a pretty brutal loss late game to Golden Guardians. So those are your MVPs so far. I know there's a lot of them out there, but there's a lot of players that definitely deserve that. Now, speaking of our next candidate, though, for plays of the week, we do have, of course, just 2 this time around. Not too many stellar plays out there. The first of which has to be mentioned, though, that being Cloud9 Sneaky and the whole team giving their effort besides Sneaky to get him that pentakill.
He might find even more. He needs another auto attack, and the Quadra is found. The heal is popped, and Sneaky will look to chase him down. Aqua escapes and denies the pentakill. Oh boy! But will Cloud9 go all
Everyone in, get up! Sneaky, right! Sneaky, what?
And our second play of the week has to be TSM taking the Liquid Nexus for the first time this split, and hopefully, for all you non-Liquid fans out there, not the last time someone does.
There's the ult from Sivir, double lift. I mean, what can Team Liquid really do? All out of options here as Broken Blade TP's in to try and end the game. Hook's gonna miss, but Xmithy gets tagged. Corday Day on the front side, there's Skirks on a killing spree. Ben charges in, takes down Xmithy. And TSM running all over Team Liquid.
That's gonna do it. Broken Blade looking for another solo kill on Impact.
And again, they'll just finish them off while they can. Broken Blade wants Impact before he can take down the turret. Flash forward towards the fountain, doesn't quite go all the way in. But Broken Blade, what a stellar performance as he polishes off everything left in TL's base. Jensen falls, the Nexus will die, and TSM will finally slay Liquid.
And yet again, one of the worst categories I have on here, but it has to be said, right? Someone has to do the trash talking out there. Feel free to leave your comments down below about teams or players you do not think had a very swell week. My first underwhelming team this week has to be 100Thieves, almost back to what they were week 1 and 2. It's been such a struggle to watch these guys back and forth. You think they're climbing week 3, and week 4 is a bit of a step backwards for these guys as they go 0-2. I think in some weird fashions, though, we're seeing typical, I almost want to say typical, but this split has not been a typical 100Thieves. If we're being honest so far, the early game deficits have led to losses 100% of the time. Their Echo Fox game was right away a deficit they could not climb out of. It seemed like, at least motivation and kind of mentality wise, some early ganks that looked really clean if they would have actually landed. Unfortunately not. They were kind of countered back and just kind of led to unsuccessful attempt after unsuccessful attempt. And yeah, some catches out here and there. A snowball lead by Echo Fox. I think Echo Fox played a very clean game, but then you look at the FlyQuest game for 100Thieves and they had the near perfect start. They had control up until about, I believe, 25 minutes in, a double mountain, an infernal, and one fight around Baron, and a lost team fight as well as the lost Baron itself, and the game was seemingly over. I think great capitalization by FlyQuest, and just unfortunate circumstances for 100Thieves time and time again. Some questionable picks, I guess you could say, for composition wise. If you want to question anyone on the roster, I hate naming individual players, as I just don't think any of these players had a stellar weekend, especially when Bang falls behind and is making choices that he typically does not, or at least we're not used to seeing Bang make. And someday, you know, having a great last weekend, and certainly not this weekend. I think Huhi had a very underwhelming, again, showing for this roster. Aframu has been seemingly not present pretty much all split long, at least not what we're supposed to see from these guys. Just a shocking experience so far. Luckily enough for North America, there shouldn't be too many worries quite yet until a few weeks from now, because all those teams are still so clumped up. The overall power of this roster for 100 Thieves does not have me worried quite yet. Alongside that though, Liquid's early game is my underwhelming team of the week. We have now seen in the last 4 matches Liquid losing 3 of their early games. Of course, Optic last week was surprising. Yes, they blew that in typical Optic fashion, but still they showed a sign of weakness in this early game. And also alongside that, Golden Guardians almost capitalizing that. Liquid though, the constant relentlessness of counter picks and counter ganks, they do a great job, right? I'm not going to lie about that. Yes, if they can lose early game and just counter pick their way back into the game and take your first Baron and snowball a victory, okay, I understand, but they cannot do that every time, and that's where it cost them against TSM. You know, they eventually feed a Jack so long, they prolong the game. TSM hanging on against those counter ganks and landing counter ganks and picks of their own, I think did a great job, and they hung on long enough where they simply just outscaled that Jax and were picking out side lanes. A great play by TSM, but also some early catches out in that bottom lane by Liquid has certainly cost them that match, and almost some other ones, although yes, that roster is still so powerful, they can afford to fall behind a majority of their matches and still come back probably. So we're going to see if that weakness is exploited by any other teams out there, but certainly TSM took advantage. Golden Guardians could have, but very lastly guys, Echo Fox has to be mentioned. Clutch Gaming could be as well. Both these teams for me, when it comes to engages, has just lacked all synergy. You see these guys entering fights out of nowhere, right? Getting picked off right away, entering a 4v5 before the fight even begins. There seems to be lack of communication when teleporting in. We've seen a load of bad teleports across many teams out there, including these two. Lack of synergy, lack of communication. I think those 4 teams this week have been pretty underwhelming. And this is going to be very short. You guys can comment down below who you think, but I think it's going to be a pretty similar pick that we've seen since week 1. Really, this week I want to go with players who've been caught out either early game or just pre-fight, and it becomes a 4v5 for their team almost instantaneously. I think Huni this weekend was really rough to watch. He was my underwhelming player for week 1 and 2. He continues back here in week 4, getting caught out time and time again. Also, Darshan for CLG, I think in that top lane has certainly struggled with this, you know, overcommitting a little bit too much, and that definitely does affect the team, especially when you play against the Golden Guardians or a team out there who's skilled enough to snowball a simple 1 kill or first blood out there. Darshan has done this a few times this split, this one being most notable though, resulting in a pretty heavy snowball loss in his lane. And then very lastly guys, Dokla this week for Optic got caught out I think a few times before fights could even happen, and I definitely do think now, again, Optic post 20 minutes has been a bit of a miscommunication issue. I think Meteos had a pretty fair weekend, but besides him, everyone else around him did pretty poor. Arrow got caught out a few times, especially I think Dokla though had to lead in the getting caught out category. So those are my underwhelming players guys for this weekend, but as always, my name is Jake. You guys can, of course, comment down below your own feedback, who deserved an award this week. I'll see you guys all back here next week though for week 5 as we approach, you know, a certain point where it's going to be for a lot of teams out there a breaking point between being stuck in bottom 6 and having a chance to actually make playoffs. But as always, I hope you guys all enjoy. I'll see you back here next week, and until then, I'll see you next time.